So today I'm doing the Sierra Cosworth cylinder head that come in for reconditioning. The customer's already stripped it. Well, got it down this far. So I'm going to de-stud it first, take off this water housing, clean up all the faces. And the first job I'm going to do with that is pressure test it just to make sure the casting's good, and then continue with the machining. The next thing on the Cosworth cylinder head to do is to recondition the valves. He's already cleaned them up, but what I like to do is shot blast the head, polish the stem, and just top the top of the valve just to give it a new mating surface for the hydraulic. He's also supplied his valve springs, and it looks like retainers and collets in there, so I'm going to put them bits through the cleaner and we'll get these in the shot blaster. So for the Sierra Cosworth cylinder head, these are the valves which I've now shot blasted, all 16 of them. So I've got to walk over to the other workshop now because I want to polish the stems up, and I'll do that in the big lathe. So I'm cleaning the stem of the Cosy up now. So I'm going to start with the inlets, and the idea with this is not to take any metal off the stem of the valve. It's just to give it a real nice polish finish, and also because you're kind of running your hand down at speed, you can also feel any wear, and you can feel any like knocks in the valve stem. So if it's got any burrs in it, you can feel it, and then you can just take them out with the emery. So I very lightly grip the valve in the grooves of the jaws, and then with a very smooth emery switch the lathe on, and then just run up and down it a couple of times. And then I also clean out the collet groove. So that's it, 15 more Cosy valves to do, and then we'll be on to the next stage. So that's the valves all with the stems polished up. I don't know if that's showing up so good, but they look brilliant. Can't feel no wear on there. So the next thing I'm going to do is have a measure up on the stem with the micrometer, and then I'm going to top. So just take a little bit off the top of each valve, so that's a new nice flat finish, and then reface all of them. But before I do that, before I go back over the other side, I've got to just quickly do the same to these BMW valves. Right, now I've cleaned up all the stems on the Cosy valves, I'm now going to reface them. So the 45-degree angle, let me just put that down and see if I can explain it a little bit better. On the valves, you can get all different angles. The most common really is 45 degrees. These Cosys run 45 degree on the inlet and a 45 degree on the exhaust. This is the inlet, this is the exhaust. So what I want to do is put a new seat on here, and what that will do is any wear, any bits of pitting, carbon, anything, it will just replace all that with a new seated angle. So to do that, I'm going to use my Comec RV516, and the first job whenever I do a set is to just clean up the grinding face on the wheel, and I use this diamond here for that. And then every sort of couple of months I just undo this bolt, give the diamond a slight twist so I'm gripping off somewhere else. So that's all the Ford Cosworth got valves all reconditioned now. Stems are polished, they've all been topped, refaced. So the next thing I'm going to get on with is the cylinder head. I'm going to take this little water takeoff off, take the inlet studs out, take the exhaust studs out, and then I'm going to put it on the pressure tester. If it passes pressure test, then we'll get on with removing the valve guides. So that's the Cosy head de-studded. I've cleaned the gasket faces up. That also helps with pressure testing. So what I need to do now is just clean the head face up a little bit and then set it up on the big pressure tester over there. We'll get some air in it and make sure that this is a good casting. On the pressure tester, the first thing that we need to do is set the pressure tester up for the depth of the cylinder head. So we do that using this tool. And we put that all the way through so it's flat on the head face and then level with the anchoring point of the cylinder head, or the flat part of the cylinder head. Then what we do is, with that setting, we then transfer that setting onto the platforms of the pressure tester. And there's basically 4 thumb screws that we can either lift up or lower, and it sets the depth. So that's the job that I'm doing now. With this pressure tester, the longest part of it is actually doing the setup. But it's also a very, very good pressure tester. We can get about 50 psi in this cylinder head, where a rad cap would normally go off at about 13 psi. So we can really test the water system. Now it doesn't test it warm, but what you lack in temperature, we gain in pressure. It's made by Delta. I believe is it Australian? No, it's Canadian. It's made by Delta and it's a Canadian machine. Well, that's what the sticker says on it anyway. I've had 2 of these Delta pressure testers, and the first one that I bought, where the machine swings over so you can test the different sides of it, this machine swings over this way. And what that means is you can tilt it at different angles and you can test down the port, which I'll show in a minute. The first machine that I had, it pivoted this way so you could spin it like that, which it was still quite a good machine, but I didn't like it as much because I couldn't see down the port very well. It used to frustrate me a little bit, so I heard this one was for sale, and the guy that I buy some second-hand machinery off when he gets some, he took my other Delta in part exchange. And what was good about this was it also come with a trolley to put all the equipment on, where my first one didn't have this trolley, which was alright, but if I show it you can see all the bars, all the pads, everything just sits real neat and next to the machine. Well, trying to get that amount of equipment on a shelf, it was just a nightmare. So I had to pay quite strong money to I had to pay quite strong money to get the deal done, but I'm pleased we did it. Okay, so now these pads should be set up correctly for the cylinder head. So I'm going to drop the cylinder head onto the platform, level it up as best as I can, and then hopefully if I just put one of these down, that should be about perfect. What I'll do is I'll move the camera over so you can see it a bit better, hopefully. So the cylinder head is now sat in here. So the next thing I've got to do is block all the waterways, which are along here. And then there's one at the front, one on the side, and one down here. But I've also got to leave one of these waterways open for me to get air in. Okay, so now the head is all clamped up and I'll show you what I've done. We've blocked off this waterway down here. There's two waterways here, so I'm using one of these for the air in, and then all these ones are blocked, and then I've got these little tapered wooden pegs, so I've screwed one of them into that waterway. I've put the pressure on the cylinder head through this bar here. And now what I'm going to do is open up the air supply. Oh, there's one more just there. Okay, so I need to block that too. So there's 20 PSI in there now. And I can hear air leaking out of it, so that's from this one here. What happens is it bleeds through the wood, but that's okay because we've got the air continuously pumping through here now. So what I'm going to do now is go over the whole cylinder head. And I'm looking and listening for air to be blown out of the waterway. So that's this cylinder head all pressure tested okay. There's absolutely no leaks from that. It's got 25 PSI running through it. Got a slight leak from that wooden peg there, but we're not bothered about that. It's not the cylinder head. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this set up because I've got another two Cosy cylinder heads to do. One for a full engine that I'm building, and then the customer that's collecting this is bringing another one to pressure test while he's here. So if I leave this set up, it'll make my life a bit easier. So now I'm going to release the air out of it, release the pressure off the cylinder head, undo the clamps, and then we're going to set up now to remove the exhaust guides. After we've moved the exhaust guides, sorry, the inlet and the exhaust guides, after we've done that, we're going to then put it through the cleaner quite a bit to try and get all the crud out of it. While I set the machine up to fit the exhaust guides, I'm going to put it in the cleaner to try and just get rid of some of the dirt from around the guide, because when I need to push these out backwards, so when I push them out, I don't want to sort of drag any dirt through the guide bore either. So, and also with washing it, it gets a bit of temperature into the cylinder head, which will just help everything slide out a bit better. Now for pressing the valve guides out the Cosy, the one thing that you need to be aware of, or I need to be aware of, is that the exhaust stem is bigger than the inlet stem on the valves. So what that means is I'm going to use two different size tools to push them through. One with a smaller step up here and one with a bigger step up here. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is also, and what that does is it stops like the wrong valve being really wobbly on the stem, which would make that tool move around, and it could potentially damage the bore of the cylinder head, which we don't want. So the next thing I'm going to do is measure the diameter, the outside diameter of the valve guides, and they're 1/2 inch 13mm, and then make sure that these tools are nowhere near that size, because I don't want any of this dragging down the inside of the bore, the valve guide bore of the cylinder head. So these are fine. And then what I need to do is set these up on the valve guide machine, which is this machine. It's made by Carmec. This bed here tilts, and then this slides over, and then basically it's got a hydraulic ram here and an hydraulic ram here. Now what we do need to do, because we're going to push the guides out backwards, we need to secure the head, and what I'll probably do is use an old camshaft, put a camshaft in upside down and then press against that. I might be able to use one of these tools and press against the cylinder head, but what I need to be careful of is the original guides that are going to come out, I've got a little retaining clip round there, so I need to make sure that they don't jam up on there, because we need those retaining clips as well. So I'm going to set this machine up, I'll get the cylinder head out the wash, and then we'll record the guides being replaced. So on the Cosworth cylinder head, I'm all set up now to remove the guides. The one thing that I do, which I thought I would show, is I'll get the head where it's roughly level by using a little spirit level dot. That way I can make sure that when I'm pressing the guide through, I'm pressing it nice and square and straight. I also put a bit of oil down each one, just to make sure that as I'm pressing it through, the oil sort of goes with it and it tries to stop the guide tearing. Now what you can do is you can hammer these guides out, and that's how I used to do them. I had all different sizes of these, and then just used to hit the guides through and then hit them in. And there's nothing really wrong with that, apart from every time that you hit the guide, it kind of shocks the guide, and it really does knock it so far out of shape, it's unbelievable. Where with one of these machines, because you're pressing and it's a steady, even pressure, it just pushes the guide through and then puts the new guide in, or presses the new guide in. So there's none of this constant shocking of the guide. Like I say, sometimes I still have to do that, and then it's just a case of resizing the guide, and I'll resize the guides in this as well to make sure that they've got the perfect clearance. But I thought I would just mention that. And then with the machine, we just switch it on, and then very carefully just press the guide down, and then as soon as it goes free, that we know that the guide's out basically. So then it's a case of just releasing that, dropping this part down, and then we'll move on to the next one. So I've removed two valve guides, and I thought I would just show the difference. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but the one on the right hand side is one that's come out with the press, and the one on the left hand side is one that I've just hit out, just to show that when you hit them out, it drags it down the side of the cylinder head and doesn't do a very good job. It hasn't put really many marks inside the cylinder head, but it does mean that I'm going to have to just tidy that up a bit. So this is the one that I've hit out just to show what it's like when you hit them out, and this is one that I've pressed out. It's so much neater. So that's all the valve guides now out of the cylinder head. So what I'm going to do now is clean up the combustion chamber and around the port. I'm going to put it back through the cleaner to get a bit of temperature into it. While that's happening, I'm going to take these little clips off all the old guides. See them there? They just flick off, they come off dead easy. And once it's warm, I'll spin it over. I'll find the right one of that fits, and we'll press the new guides in. That's the old valve guides, the new valve guides, and all the little clips that I've got to put on to the new valve guides. The next thing for me to do is to fit the new guides. I've put these little clips on, and what that does is it just stops the valve guide falling through the cylinder head. Not that I've ever seen a Cosy one slip, but well, in fact I probably haven't, because they run that clip. However, they are a bit of a bugger to get out, so I can't imagine for 1 minute they would fall. Anyway, we've got the clips on them, and what I want to do is I don't want to press against this top part of the guide, because the stem seal pushes on that, and what can happen is if I press on that, or if I was to drift it in with a hammer, that there would open up and the stem seal would rip trying to get it on, or it wouldn't even go on. So I don't want to press against that bit there, I want to press against that bit there. So I've got this little thing machined up. So what that means is when that's in there and that's in there, I'm pushing against the solid part of the guide. But if I do that and I was to try and push that all the way home, it would then force that clip off. So just with a little washer, I'm going to put the guide in, the washer in, and then press against it, nice and oiled up, and then I'll just press it just until I can hear the pressure on the machine build up, and then I know that that's all the way home. So that's all the exhaust valve guides in, no problem at all, nice and quick, I hadn't had to beat them in and distort them. So what I'm going to do now is swap the head over and do exactly the same but on the inlet guides. But what I will try before I will do that is see if the valve fits in there straight away. I mean, it shouldn't do, because normally you just have to finish the sizing off, but it would be nice if it was quite close. I mean, straight away, let me move this over so you can see. Straight away, it's almost perfect. Where I can promise you that if they was hitting with the hammer, they would have definitely needed a lot more work than that. So what I always do with the bronze guides on something like a Cosy or a Vauxhall, well, anything really, is I diamond hone them as well. So what I'll do is once I've got the inlets installed, I'll then diamond hone them, so I'll show that too. But what I'm going to quickly do now is swap over the tool to press the inlets in. Put the exhaust one back in the rack. We'll oil the valves, oil the valve guides as I just pop them in the cylinder head. Like I say, that will stop them dragging as they go in. So the next job to do on the Cosy is to hone the valve guides. I've done the exhaust already, but it's a different size on the inlet. Now, I thought I would just show that they don't actually need honing because they've been pressed in and not hitting with the hammer. They are actually a really good size. But what I want to do is make sure that the manufacturing of the guide is nice and square. Well, it's nice and true and parallel, and I also want to put a slight crosshatch finish in there. So I'm going to use my diamond valve guide hone for that, which is this. Basically fits into just a normal drill. This part here expands the diamond, which is here, and then I do it on top of the honer because I want to use the honing oil to keep the guide lubricated. So what I'll do is I'll set the camera up and time lapse that being done. So the next process on the Cosy cylinder head is for me to cut the seats. So for this I'm going to use my PROVALVE seat cutter, which is about a year old now, just over. I must admit I don't use it all the time. I need to. I haven't because I need to do a little bit more setup on the balance of it, and I just thought, you know what, I'll wait until it's in the new workshop. But the machine is very good. It's very good on hard seats, and Cosworths have really hard seats. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe the bed down quick, wipe the machine down, and then I'll start the process of setting it up and then film the seats being cut. So that's the PROVALVE all cleaned. I've just wiped all the swarf off the bed, just lightly oiled it just to help it float, wiped it all clean again. I've got a slight water leak from this part of the guttering in the old unit, and it's just dripped on the corner here and just brought a little bit of surface rust out on it. So I've cleaned that off. This machine is made by a company called PROVALVE in Turkey. I believe this to be the only one in the UK. I found it online, got talking to the company, and the company is absolutely fantastic to deal with. They email all the time. They've also seen that I've not used it so much on some of the YouTube videos, and are trying to just help me out with a few little problems that I've got, even as far as inviting me over to Turkey to the factory to spend a day with them and go through the machine over there. So customer service wise, I can't fault them. They're fantastic, and I love the concept of the machine. It's all touch panel up here, so you've got a vacuum gauge. You can change the language. You can change all the settings and test all the sensors. And then this is the worksheet. So in here you can put all the information for the customer. You can save all the data, all the vacuum sheet. So, I mean, it's probably not got Cosworth in it, but Ford, Transit. So what I can do is put in here Cosworth and what pilot I use, what cutter I use, and just things like that, really. This is brilliant. The vacuum report, you can save all the vacuum report data up here. So I could put in here customer, save it. But what I've not got is I've not got this side of it connected up, so we can't print the data. However, when we move into the new workshop, all this is going to be up and running. So every single cylinder head that we do, we'll print this screen to see that the seats have been cut, the vacuum test has been sorted as well. So if we go back onto worksheet, then this tells you a depth is here, so we can set this and then keep an eye on how deep we cut. So every seat we can cut the same. This is the traffic light system for the automatic centering, and then this is the air for the sphere, the cylinder, the work table, the lock, the spindle speed, and the load, and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, this is brilliant. What you do with this is you set the head up first upside down, so the valves will be sitting against here. We'll clamp it down nice and tight with these two lock-in mechanisms. We'll make sure it's sitting in the middle of here, and then we'll roll the head over. We'll drop a pilot in it, and then set the bubble up to get the head sitting nice and square. So I'll mount the head, and then I'll film some more. What we need to do is bring the cut-in head and everything down 150 mil. So I'm going to reset the ruler. I'm going to bring it down to 150 mil, which is there. Lock the machine off underneath. I'll show you that in a sec. I'm in a bit caggy handed. So that's 150 mil. Lock the machine off here on that handle, and then open up the spheres, and this will all move and find its own centre. And then we know that it's found it because it'll be nice and even all the way around here, which it is. And then lock both the spheres off again, undo the clamp, and then we can start to prepare to cut the first seat. That's the cylinder head all mounted onto the PROVALVE now. It's all nice and tight, it's all clamped down nice and solid, and the one thing that we need to make sure we've got is basically these clamps don't cover the valve area here and here, so that's all set perfect now. So we'll just give it a spin over. What's dripping off it is honing oil from when we've honed the valve guides. So the next job that I've got to do is get the head sitting level with the cutting head. So I'll do that by putting a pilot in there. I'll find the right one. Wipe off as well, it's covered in honing oil. I thought I'd drained it all out, but obviously not. So I even like the toolbox that mounts to the side with this machine. It's I don't know if you probably can't see it, can you? That's the little toolkit for it. So that holds a load of the pilots and cutting head holders. That's the tool for doing valve seats. But that's quite a nice little toolbox on there as well. It's quite handy being next to the job all the time. So what we do now is put the pilot in one of the centre guides like that. And then we put the little bubble in there as well. And then basically we can then move this to roughly the centre of the machine. Like that. And then move this so you've got the bubble just about lined up perfect. Like that. Lock that first bit off, and then you've got a fine adjustment screw here so we can get it really absolutely bang on in the centre, and then lock off the two main locking bars like that. Perfect. And then the next thing that we need to do is set the cutting tool up. So we'll just put our pilot to one side for now because we're going to use that in a minute. And then we want to find a cutting tool or a setting tool which is quite a strong bodied one. We don't want one too thin. We want something that's pretty sturdy that we can put some pressure on. Then I'm going to put the guide into the body like that. Nip up the Allen key that holds that in, which is on the side of the tool holder. And then I'm going to loosen off the two that hold that tool holder in. And then what I want to do is look for one of the bodies which has got a bit more rigidity to it, because I think we can get away with it in there. Don't think that'd be too big. On the exhaust side, we're going to have to change it because it's smaller and this body probably won't close in enough. Next thing to do is to check what cutter we're using, and then also check that it's nice and sharp, which it looks good. I will just give it a quick dress up on the built-in tool grinder, or tip grinder. So the tip, the cutting carbide tip, just slots in there, and then we can switch this on. This is a diamond wheel here, and then we'll just really carefully, just on the cutting edge, just dress it up so we can see that it's all new. That's perfect. We can put the cutter in the machine, in the tool holder, sorry. And then next thing I need is one inlet valve and one exhaust valve. And then there's the two valves, but because we're using the we're doing the inlet first, we'll set the inlet up. So what we're doing now is we're plotting on the seat whereabouts we want to put, or we're plotting on the seat of the valve where we want the cut to be. So we're going to mirror it onto the cutter. So basically, I want to try and use as much area of the valve as possible. So I'm going right to the tip of the valve, and then just making sure I can see all the way around, nice and neat like that. And then what I'm going to do is mirror that onto the cutting tip on the seat cutter. So I'll just give it a wipe off so I can see where I'm setting it up to. And scroll, I'll just push that down. And then with that screw there, I'm going to adjust that out until I know that the tip is in exactly the same position on the cutter, or on the seating part of the cutter, as it was on my valve. And taking a bit of time and making sure you set this part up correctly will give the cylinder head a better valve job. It'll give the cylinder head seat more area. It'll help with the flow. It'll put a nice, good, whatever size in millimetre cut angle you want on there. And then it will also use the two other angles, because it's a 3-angle cutter, to give it a nice blend into the seat. So once we've done that, we then lock the cutter into the main body of the PROVALVE, like that, and just lock the cutting head into the machine nice and tight. So now I've centralised the cutting head and the pilot and all the spheres and everything. We're going to start off by cutting one of the seats. So we just let the bed float around at the start, and then very carefully bring the pilot down into the guide. Now the pilot's in the guide, we hit the automatic centering button, and then that runs for a process of moving the sphere, moving the table, and allowing it to find the center of the guide. It then automatically locks everything off, and then all I have to do is start the cutting spindle, pick what speed I want, and then cut into the seat. And then as I lift the pilot up, it automatically switches the machine off. So that's one done, and then I could just move over to the next one. Now I can move over to the first couple that we do. And that's the really good thing about this machine, is it's so fast. I mean, I'm not even used to using it properly yet, but compared to normal setting up, and when I'm cutting the seat, I'm also keeping an eye on my depth gauge. So that's the inlets all done and looking nice. I've now flipped the cylinder head over, I've changed the pilot, levelled it all up, adjusted the cutter, and now I'm going to cut the exhaust seats. So that is all the exhaust and inlet seats now cut, and it's done a cracking job of them. What I'm going to do now is grab the valves that are all reconditioned, and technically with the accuracy of the seat cutter and also the valve facer, they shouldn't really need grinding in, but I don't like taking anything for granted, so we're going to grind all the valves in and then mark them 1 to 8 so we know which order they go back in, and then get ready to reface it. So this part is back to the old school way of using carborundum paste and a lapping stick. I'll just show you how to do it on 1 or 2 of them, and then just get ready to skim it. The next thing for me to do is to grind the valves in. So for this I'm using my carborundum paste, and then I put a nice little bit all the way along the bottom of the valve where I know the seat's going to be. You don't need to pack this out with loads of carborundum. And this stuff's quite good actually. This is made by a company called Clover, I believe. Yeah, and it's like a medium compound, but what's good about it is it starts quite coarse, and then as you're using it, it breaks down to fine. Now, what I always do is use like a little bit of penetrant on the seat as well, and that just helps everything move around and not jam up. guide just needs a little brush out. Must have a bit of swarf in it from the seat cutter. That's it. And then the other thing that I do is this suction cup can get glazed up, but if you just push that against the wall like that, it just kind of takes the glaze off it and it helps it stick. So that's a little trick that I found that works quite well. And then I'm going to move the seat cutter slightly, or the bed of the seat cutter, so I could just put a little bit of angle on it so it's easier for me to grind it in. Push that on, and then what I'm doing is continuously listening for the carborundum noise to grind the valve in. And then, I mean, I'd like £1 for every one of these done. So experience, you kind of know once it's cut into the seat perfectly, which is about now. And then what I'm doing then to check is I'll wipe all the old carborundum off the valve, and then you're looking for a nice grey line all the way around with no polish parts in it and no breaks. And then you also are looking for exactly the same nice polished effect on the seat. And that's it. If there's any polished parts left, then you just grind it again. But the seat cutter is accurate enough where, unless it's thrown a little bit of a wobbly, it should always cut perfect. So what I'll do now is put that in the rack. This is the 4th exhaust valve along, so I'll put that in the rack and then I'll carry on grinding the rest of them in. Right, so that's all of the valves ground in on the Cosy. So the last thing for me to do is to just give it a wipe off. I'm going to put all the valves back in order in the cylinder head, and then on my PROVALVE machine we're going to do a vac test on it to make sure that all the valves are seated. Now what I like to do is I try and do a vac test whenever I can with no valve springs installed. That way you're not relying on the valve spring pushing the valve closed against the seat. If you do it with no spring on, you are just relying on the fact that the seat's cut right and the valve's faced correctly and there's not too much play in the exhaust guides. So sometimes it doesn't always like go round to an absolute perfect seal, because you naturally are going to get a little bit down the valve guides because there's a tolerance between the valve stem and the valve guide. But anyway, we'll load all the valves into the cylinder head now in order. Sorry about that, I was multitasking and stuttering. So basically, when I put them in my valve tray up here, there's a little hole in this one, and I always have that towards the front of the cylinder head, so I can't get them in the wrong place. If I just put the camera down, what I'll do is, as I'm installing them into the cylinder head, I just give them a wipe off just to make sure there's no dust on them. Because believe it or not, even the slightest little bit of dust or a hair or anything like that will cause the valve not to sit in the seat correctly. I mean, with the work cleaning up the combustion chamber slightly and the amount of time it's been in the cleaner getting it warm to fit the guides and things, the head's actually looking so much nicer than it did when it come here. It was in a bit of a bad state when it come here. So by the time we've given it a nice diamond finish on the head face, it'll look really good. So with my PROVALVE, there is 2 different vac tests that I can do. I can do it on the main workshop worksheet screen, What that will do is it just puts the vacuum gauge there, and it lets you know the vacuum that's pulled. Or I could do a vacuum report, and in the vacuum report I can write down all the customer's details and stuff. Because I can't print this or email at the moment because we need to connect it up properly, I'm just going to do it in the worksheet. And then to do that, we just switch it on, and then basically if the gauge goes into the green, we've got a good seat. So I'll start off just putting it onto cylinder number 1, and then straight away you can see it's right in the green. Cylinder number 2, cylinder number 3, and then finally number 4. So that's passed vacuum test on all of the exhausts. I'm going to check the inlets now. So the next thing for me to do is to just engrave these exhaust valves, and I do that. This is just a snap-on Blue Point little vibrating engraver. So all I do with this is just nice and neat 1 to 8 it. And then I'm going to take the exhaust valves out, put them in the wash. I don't need to keep them in order now because I've engraved them. The seats look lovely. There's a nice golden finish to the seat where they've been cut with the seat material, and then we've got a nice grey line all the way round. I've done the seating angle to 2mm on the exhaust and 1.7mm on the inlet. Just because the seats are quite a wide seat, and if we put a real small, like 1.5 or 1mm cut on them, it puts a real good lip inside there. So when we're porting them, we'll put a thinner seat on it, but on a standard reconditioned cylinder head like this one, we just keep it almost to factory spec. And then I'm going to just flick the head round a little bit just so I can get on the inlet face with the vac tester, and then we're going to do a quick vac test on the inlets as well, and then engrave the inlets so they're the same as the exhaust. And these have all got a really good seal without any spring on them. So if I show you quickly, so I'm really happy with that. We've got it right round to probably 0.72 millibar, which is a really good seat, because by the time I've put the stem seal around the guide and it's got the spring pressure pulling it back, it will probably go round a little bit more. Not that it needs it, because that is virtually a perfect seat. So all I've got to do now is put that back on its holder. All I've got to do now is engrave them valves, spin the head over, and get ready to reface it. So the Cosy head is now mounted to my Comex head skimming machine. This is all fixed from when we had the accident with it a few weeks ago. Sam's put a new motor on the back. We're definitely going to get a new machine, but what we're going to buy is another swing head because they're really good, but this one's like dual purpose. This grinds and fly cuts, and we're going to get one which is just for fly cutting. Anyway, back to the cylinder head. That's mounted on the machine. I've got it all nice and level. In this light, actually, the better light in this workshop, you can see how good the seats look. Now they're all recut and ground in. And yeah, let's see how much comes off this cylinder head. I'm hoping not a lot, because it's actually quite a good cylinder head, this. It's not been skimmed to death, so I'm hoping it's just a case of tidying it up, and that should be good enough. That's the head refaced. I've taken 5/1000ths off an inch with that, and I must admit, I absolutely love the finish of this head skimmer. The finish is incredible. It's There's a little diamond PCD button in there, what gives that finish. So the last thing I'm going to do is just deburr some of the edges, and all I use for that is just an old piston ring. It's an old second ring, so it's got a nice like sharp edge to it, and then just run around the whole cylinder head, and that just makes it better when you're handling the cylinder head, because you can leave quite a sharp finish. It can be a bit bad on the hands. It can slice it quite easy. I'd rather just deburr it just so it's nicer for the customers, and it's just a nicer finish. It's just a nicer job. So with all the machining done, the last job for me to do on this is to remove the oil gallery bungs out of the back of the cylinder head and the front of the cylinder head. These are just little Allen key grub screws. I'm going to take them out, so when I'm cleaning it I can make sure that both these oil feeds for the hydraulics are completely clear. So the last process on the Cosy cylinder head is it's all washed now. It's been through the cleaner for another hour. I've blown it all off. Because I pressure tested it before I did a lot of the machining, the last thing I want to do is just check that the cooling system is good. So instead of putting it on the pressure tester, this time I'm running a massive vacuum through the cylinder head with this bit of equipment. So it sits on this oily pad, which is like a closed cell foam, and then we pull a massive vacuum through it, block the other waterways off, and then leave it for 20 minutes. So the cylinder head is now fresh off the vac tester. Let's give it its final wipe down. Next job is for me to fit the valve stem oil seals. Because the exhaust and the inlet are different size stems, they are different stem seals as well. So these are the inlets, and what I've got for doing valve stem oil seals is this bit of equipment here. So it comes with all different size pilots and then different size like arbors, and then it's a case of just pushing the stem seal over the pilot, putting some oil around it just to help it slide over the new bronze guides, and then just installing it, and then giving it a tap until you hear the tone of the hammering change, and that's when it's hit the bottom of the guide. There you go, that last tap was it hitting the bottom. So that's that one taken care of. So one more. So install it onto the tool, drop of oil around it, and then listen for the tone change again. So to do the next set of stem seals, I need to change the guide, sorry, the pilot, but the actual arbor is probably okay. So what I'll do is just go into this bit of kit here. We'll put that one back, and I think it's this one. Yeah, that's a perfect fit on there. So what I can do is quickly just try this in here, and what we want it to do is hit on the metal part of the stem seal, not any of the rubber. So that there's perfect. But what I'm going to do first is build the inlets up. So I've dropped the valve springs into the 6 that I've already done, so I've just got to put these last 2 in. It's important to make sure that they locate in the spring seat, because the spring seat is like a cup. There we are. And then the next thing is all the valve spring retainers. So all these have been in the cleaner for quite a while, so they've all come up, and the ultrasonic, so they've all come up really nice. And then just drop all these onto the top of the spring. like that. And then I need to grab all the inlet valves out the geyser tank. And then with the clean rag, I'm going to give them all a wipe. And then in here is some build lube, and I basically dip the end of the valve into that, and what that does a couple of jobs. Most importantly, it lubricates the valve guide and the valve stem, but it also puts some good thick oil around the cotter groove. So when you come to install the collets or the cotters, they've got something to stick to, so they shouldn't keep falling out of the groove. So that's the Cosworth cylinder head completely finished now. I'll show you all these faces. So all the gasket faces on this have been cleaned off. The head has had, I think, 5 thou skimmed off it with a diamond PCD. New valve guides fitted and honed. All the valves have been reconditioned, so they've been shot blasted with fine media. The stems have been polished. New valve, new 45-degree angle, and then they've been topped as well. The seats have all been cut with 3 angles, vac tested, pressure tested. Then I've vac tested the waterways as well. New set of stem seals. All the springs are back on it. While it was in the cleaner, I put some alley acid on it to try and bring the alley a bit neater, because it was in a bit of a state, this one. I've had the oil gallery bungs out so we can make sure that this oil gallery across here, which feeds the hydraulic followers, that's all nice and clean, so there's no chance of the oil pressure pushing dirt back into the new followers. And then I've put these studs back in because I removed these for the valve guide press, because the press comes in and tries to hit these outer studs. I've engraved it so we know it's a head that we've done in case we ever see it back. And yeah, it looks really good. It looks super clean, which is what we want. I've cleaned all the threads out as well, so they're all good. And then I showed like me engraving all the valves, so we know that they're kept in order. And then it's got, like I say, the nice finish on it. So tomorrow my customers come in to collect that. Yeah, so tomorrow my customers come in to collect that. It's all finished. It's another one done, and we can crack on with a bit more work. So I hope you enjoyed this Cosy video, guys. We're also building a Cosy engine for someone at the moment, so I'm going to record that soon as well. It's a race engine going in a Sonny Howard built space frame Peugeot 309, so that should be a good one to do. And that's it, guys. That's the Cosy cylinder head all reconditioned. Thanks for watching it. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you could hit the subscribe button down here and the alert bell, and give us a thumbs up, and if you could leave the word Cosworth in the comment section below, I'd appreciate that as well. And take care, guys, and I'll see you on the next video.